What Got You There is a podcast for high achievers looking to learn from the most successful people of all time what their strategies, lessons, and routines are that made them successful. Now it's your journey, so it's time to learn what's going to get you there. I'm Sean DeLaney, and today on the What Got You There podcast, after 5 years, we have our special 300th episode. Now you might be wondering why it's special. Well, after 3,000 hours deconstructing and interviewing world-class high achievers and performers, I'm the one interviewed. I'm interviewed by Dr. Michael Gervais, who's a performance coach and has deconstructed and worked with some of the most proficient and elite teams, companies, organizations on the entire planet. And he's going to be interviewing me to deconstruct me and some of the things that I've learned along the way. So if you're ready for our special 300th episode, get ready.
Got you there with Sean.
I'm excited to do this with you.
Mike, man, I am fired up.
You are a planner, right? Like you think and discern before you measure twice, cut once.
Measure 10 times.
The measuring many times, and then you anchor it with being visual, and then you anchor it with thinking more than feeling. And so this is part of your maybe less observable way that you practice, is that you're a thinker, you're a planner, and you like to be well prepared. And I think accuracy is really important for you. Does that mean anxiety and perfectionism are part of the play, or I'm off tune there?
No, I'll just kind of speak what comes to mind and let you make, like, you might view it differently than how I think about it. Where I think of anxiety, I guess, anytime I put something out, right? Like even this episode, there's just going to be that cringe inside of me. There's been very few moments in my life probably where I've been like, that met expectations, and I feel awesome about that.
Whose expectations?
Mine, internal.
And people say that, but we learn expectations and standards. So who did you learn yours from?
Good question. Everything for me probably started with my parents, and there were certain defining moments that I saw that were just, I still remember today, like very vividly, early on things that my parents did that it was like, oh, that's really important to me. Did
you just drop into your heart a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You can hear it in my voice, right? Like voice changed. I'm thinking about a moment with my mom. So we're in Baltimore, the Baltimore Mall. I forget the exact name of it. I was probably four or five, maybe. Crowded food court, just having lunch, some fast food thing. And all of a sudden there's a table, there's some commotion going at it. And it's a father literally like verbally abusing the hell out of this kid. He's got two young kids there. Boom. My mom jumps up. So she's got 4 kids. My dad's not with us right there. She gets in this guy's face and is basically like, you talk to that kid again, there's gonna be some serious trouble here. My mom's like 5'5". It's not like she's like some huge woman or something. And then she's in this guy's face, like, you never, ever talk to that kid like that. Literally stood up to him. This goes on for a minute or two, ends up getting a cop. And I was like, whoa, like there's 300 people in this food court. 150 of them are males, way bigger than my mom, that could have done that. She did it. So there's moments like that when you ask about like who set foundation. I see things like that, and it's like, whoa, I'm never being the same after that.
How did that change you?
You got to, when you know something's right, you got to stand up for it. And believe me, that was not the only time. I saw my mom do this at school with mean teachers to kids when she's dropping your kids off, and she gets out of the car and she's like, and it's like, holy shit, like, okay, all right, if this woman's doing that, then like I need to speak my truth when I know it's true. And so just kind of saw that from an early age.
How are you doing with that in your life as a first principle that your heritage is passed on to you?
The heritage, or that?
The first principle, speaking truth to power.
It feels really good.
You're doing well with that in your life.
Well, I think anytime that, for those moments, right, like there's going to be confrontation at some point on the other side. And so I think, random example, like that teacher or that man in that food court, they don't want to hear that. But there's certain things that I can live with bringing up something like that if it seems wrong. So internally, yeah, I do feel good about that.
And in your podcast, in the 299 before this, do you speak truth to the perceived power that the other person on the podcast?
It's funny. I really don't talk very much, like, at all in the podcast, like, at all. It's funny, like, this conversation alone will probably have more words from me than all 299 other ones.
Should we stop now? We should stop.
No.
Stop. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. So if somebody says something on the podcast, is just a platform, but that you fundamentally disagree with, will you try to learn from that? Or you say, hey, Mrs. X or Mr. X, like, I see this so differently?
Yeah, I would probably say I see it differently, but try to learn from it, right? Like, there's been too many times that I've been completely wrong in a decision, in a way of thinking, that if I hadn't been open enough to explore their way of thinking, then I wouldn't be seeing clearer today. And so, yeah, I always try to come from that position of, like, what can this moment teach me? What is this person going to teach me? And try to explore their ideas.
There you go. Okay. And then how old were you, did you say, when you were in the food court?
Yeah, I mean, this would have been 5, like, I have 4 or 5, maybe 6.
Do you remember your experience as a 5-year-old in that moment, or before, when the aggression was being displayed?
Unease, kind of like, whoa, like, my parents had never treated me like, like, you could feel like that's not supposed to be happening. And it was just like, whoa, kind of like, my father's not there. So probably somewhat scared, uneasy, and like, what's happening here? Where, like, my world just didn't feel stable.
Yeah, there you go. Very cool for mom to stand up. How about that? Did that scare you more, or did you start to feel emboldened?
Yeah, it's funny, Mike. So I mentioned my mom's like 5'5", like, man, though, like, this is funny. Even when I was playing sports, I had 20 pounds of muscle more than I do now. Like, so I was, like, very strong. Every time, though, like, I could ever be like 20 years old, and I was like, damn, man, this woman has some strength. So I think, like, early on, even, I always just was like, man, like, if someone broke into our house, I was like, man, I'm going to feel bad for that person, because Joan DeLaney is literally going to bring the force on them.
There's such a difference between emotional strength, mental strength, and physical.
Yeah.
And physical is so observable that people, like, if you can't get past that, then you never get to know the other. Rarely do you get to know the other sides, the emotional, mental. But if you had to pick, being someone physically strong or emotionally strong or mentally strong, I bet I know your answer.
Oh, 100. But it's funny, Mike, because if you asked me this 10 years ago, I'm going physical, where now I realize emotional it's not even comparable.
So how are you learning and hydrating the idea of emotional strength from your interviews and from the podcast?
So where I operate from, I feel like everything begins with awareness. Like, if I'm not even aware of where I'm flawed in how I handle certain emotions, I'm not going to be able to improve it in the way I want to. And so I really try to think deeply. And when I say think deeply, I literally mean, like, sitting there thinking deeply about different behaviors and different reactions. And what I've just experienced over time is, then when I behave in a way or show an emotional reaction to something that's not in alignment with who I want to be, something internally, I can feel it. Where in the past, the feedback loop on that would have been way longer, right? Like, I'd be upset for days or whatever. And then it's like, all right, let me explore this a bit further. Where now certain moments, like, you could feel it in the moment. And that, I don't know, just started with awareness, and then trying to really focus deeply on that. Because like I said a minute ago, something I really do think about deeply, and I feel like I have for a long time, is really, like, not what do I want, but who do I want to be? And when I'm out of alignment with that, and that took a really long time, and that's continuing to evolve to get clear on that, but I can, like, feel it now. So that's like a really core indicator for me.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that's the big work. Interesting. Do you mind if I pick the eyes out of something real quick?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
You said, when I recognize when I'm flawed with something. It's an interesting choice of words. As if there's only a small part of you that's flawed. And even the idea that flaws is an interesting model to view yourself through, and as opposed to a whole myriad of other ways that you could think about the parts of you that have not yet been refined, as opposed to, like there's a flaw. And so I'm wondering if this is a Judeo-Christian approach that you come from, which is, folks don't necessarily like to talk about this when it comes to these two religions, but there's three ways that we come into the world according to a philosophical argument or position, if you will. There's tabula rasa. We come into this world blank slate, and then it's up to us and our environments to shape us. We come in flawed, evil little beings that need forgiveness and baptism to get to heaven, right? So this is, unfortunately, and most Christians, I grew up in that faith as well. Like they say, no, we're not born evil. Well, why do you need baptism to get into the pearly gates? Right. Okay. So there's a dilemma in there. Or the third is that we're born good, inherently good. And so I'm wondering, when you use the flawed approach, I'm wondering if you have an orientation to one of those three models, those philosophical models of how humans are born.
Yeah, it's funny because you said I think through things a lot, and I'm probably very calculated. The word flawed, honestly, like the more you deconstructed that, I'm like, you kind of just rolled off the tongue where I hadn't thought about it enough. Where the Christian model you brought up, I don't think about that at all. Like I don't feel like I'm repenting some sin here or something. Like that model and just kind of baffles me a bit. So that doesn't resonate. So when I said flawed, it had nothing to do in conjunction with that. Yeah, I kind of
cool. So yeah. Go to one of those three. Like, what position would you take when you look, now that you have a son, and when you philosophically think about all newborns?
Yeah, it's tough because I want to go to the third one, to be honest with you. But then I think about some of those things, right? Like a serial killer. And I'm looking at my son and I'm like, what did that serial killer look like when he was 3.5 years old? And so I'm curious about that in terms of like what we came here with, like past programming and stuff like that. But genuinely, I do feel like there is more natural goodness in each of us. And I think a lot of times, or over time, that gets clouded, sometimes pushed out of us, beaten out of us. But I do think humans operate more from a positive, good state.
And then talk about that perfectionism.
Yeah, I have no idea where that comes from. It's funny too, because I would love for you to deconstruct this, because I do say that it feels really internally driven, because the people who I respect deepest in my life, there were times where they couldn't have been prouder, but it still hadn't met my internal expectation. And so that's when I say it's like internally driven, like that's what it feels like. And I don't know, like, I just feel like, I think you discover things within yourself and other people where it's just like, whoa, like a person was capable of that. And so for me, it's not this like sad thing when it doesn't meet expectation. It's like, yeah, man, there's more there. And it's like, hell yeah, like, let's keep searching for that. Let's keep pushing to see that. And so to me, it's like an excitement phase, I guess.
And when you think, the deconstructed nature here, it's not a simple path, but the guiding thought here is that where do we learn standards from? And people like to say, oh, it's for myself, and expectations. Standards and expectations are a little different, but they can ring around the same key. But where do we learn them from? It's from others, for the most part. And because, like your young child, and I've got an adolescent child right now, they are looking for from their elders, from their environment. Like, is that what we're talking about? Like, is this? And so I say to my son all the time, like, we have high standards. Your mother and I have really high standards in our life, and we have a certain way that we embrace the growth arc, and so we have high standards from a value standpoint, and we have high standards to the effort to apply oneself towards whatever task is at hand. And that task could be something as benign as listening in a conversation, or I should say as deep as listening in a conversation, to washing the dishes, whatever it might be. And then I say all the time as well is that you are going to share your standards with us. And then when we understand them, we will help you hold to those so that you can become more attuned to the standards to be able to experience the upper reaches of your potential. And he looks at me and goes, "Dad, stop." And he laughs. And it's like, and so, and I don't say it so dramatically to him, but all that being said is that we learn it from somewhere. And so I think one of the great gifts we can give our children is for them to work from the inside out and not from the outside in. Okay, so all that being said, a little bit of high standards, high expectations for yourself. There's a bit of anxiety in there. There's a bit of perfectionism in there. And then you've added another note, which is like you're really excited about what comes next. So can you paint on this canvas like what 3 or 6 years looks from now?
I'm just trying to, I was thinking about this word a lot, like at the start of the new year, and that's around quality. And so like you can go into like Robert Pirsig's Zen, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and like how he thinks about quality. And so I was like, there's a handful of things to get back to depth earlier in our conversation. There's a handful of things. There's a handful of people that if I really explore, even over the arc of my life, seems to be golden threads that I want to put more effort, attention, and focus towards, because those derive the most meaning for me. And so when I think about fast forwarding 5-6 years, I'm hoping to cultivate and develop those to a deeper level. Like we even mentioned my wife, Kelsey, like I want to explore even further our relationship. And then with my boys, right? Like the connection I have with them. Like I was really fortunate. I had a very good father that I just feel really connected with. And so there's been certain models I've had that I've looked to, and it's like, wow, like when you see them, how they interact when their child is 20, 25, it's like, that's what I'm going for. Like that to me is really important. So I'm really laser focused on some of those right now.
Have you put language to those values that you're working from?
Yeah. So I do a lot of just, I don't know, call it self-reflection and stuff. So I have like different documents that I've written all this out. And that probably started a lot from like kind of a fast forward type experiment, just like internal thought experiment of like, what does it look like when I'm 80? And like I said, very visual. So playing that out like a movie and thinking deeply on that. And then just kind of how I operate. What I think about is I want to collapse time. So what I mean by that is, okay, I know what I want to look like when I'm 80. And so there's certain things that like just are going to take time to get to, but there's plenty of mindsets, behaviors that you can embody in this present moment, that if you do that, you are acting as if that future self. And so when I think about roles with relationships, even to talk about like emotional control, it's like who likes being around someone who can't control their temper and stuff. And so when I think about collapsing time, I like deeply thought on those moments and then who I try to embody right now.
What's the emblem that you're working from for an 80-year-old?
So this has been a reoccurring picture movie that has played out, and it's someone who I love nature and being around nature. So that's part of it. Not the most important element, but surrounded by family, and not like one of those tense families. It's like there's a slowness to it, right? Like we're not jumping up to go do something to be somewhere else. We're deeply present, like, filled with laughter. We're there in that moment. We're not on phones. We're not doing all these different, it's like, this is the best thing. And so that movie plays again and again. And so I think about who I need to be in order for that to actually take place in the future.
So nobody does it alone. It's an axiom that I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about, but it's like, I'm so certain that nobody, not individual athletes, contributors, artists, like nobody does it alone. So if that is a statement that you would nod your head to, then how would you hope your community, the What Got You There community, could play a part in helping you?
This might be a bigger theme, and this probably won't be helping me. So push back if this is not. But it's like, I think these conversations, your podcast, you were having conversations before I ever started this show, that I heard people articulate things that I had felt myself I had never heard articulated that way. I finally put language to feeling. And so that opened up new things. And then even just like other things like training techniques, stuff like that had been so influential. And because of a conversation you, Mike, were having years ago, I am different, and I am different for Kelsey, for my boys, for other people in my family. And so to me, like, I really do think about like, how do I grow as an individual so that the other people in my life, and that's including the What Got You There community, can learn from that and then also grow in their own lives. And so it's just like, you got it. My learning curve, I think, really sped up when I really went from like theory to practice, where I'd hear a conversation with you, Mike, and it wasn't like, man, that's a really cool thing. That's an interesting take. It's like, no. Let's figure out how we can deconstruct this and then really build it up into our own framework to live it. And so I would hope the community is doing that. Like, they're enjoying the conversations, it's entertaining, but like, let's go further, right? Like, depth over breadth on that. And it's like, how do we explore some of these really good takeaways? I've had a lot of people reach out and they're like, man, that conversation with XYZ, it was like, oh man, I wish I was like taking all these notes. And I'm kind of like, well, why weren't you? Like, let's go further on it. So I'd ask the community, like, do that, right? Like, there's probably a person that you want to become, or that there's certain things in the back of your head you're working towards. So it's like, let's start collapsing time and trying to learn from the lessons of people on this show and then start living that. To be honest with you, Mike, that's really important for me. My mind truly goes to what I was talking about earlier, where I have this expectation, this potential within us all. And I think the majority of us never seek that potential within ourselves. So there's that line that hell is like seeing the version of yourself that you could have been and not being that. So I think about that, right? Like, it's incredible what we're capable of. And to think that I'm not going to use that potential scares me.
Okay, so then the skills that you use to become great at lacrosse, what were some of those skills? And what was the level that you had of success in lacrosse?
So yeah, I feel like I felt like there was a level I reached that was, there was a handful of people on the planet, multi-year college All-American, top 10 professional draft pick. So it was definitely like at that elite level. And there's commonalities amongst, right? Like almost this obsession, but it wasn't, I don't say that in like a negative way. Like, I just freaking loved the sport, where I really viewed this as this internal pull. Like, I coached a lot afterwards. So I saw so many parents try to push kids, and you could see it. They just didn't want it. It was like, my parents never one time ever had to push me. It was just like maniacally obsessed with it. Like, I couldn't get enough of training, playing. I just loved it all. And like internally, even like I mentioned visual, like I was visualizing while I was playing. This wasn't as clear to me till a few years later, how entrenched I was in the visual experience while I was practicing. And so that was really helpful for me, I think. Even about, we talk about like emotional control. You'll probably push back because I know there's like no big moments. I loved if there was like 10 seconds left. This was in college, and we called a play. There was like 20 seconds left. It was going to go to me. And then the other team called the timeout. And the first thing I said to my coach, you better not fucking change that play. Like, it was like, no. Like, I want this. And so that I tried to, something I thought about all the time younger, and this will tie into what I was saying a second ago, is I forget who said this, if it was a football player or what, but it was, somebody is going to watch me play today that has never seen me play. And I want to leave an impression on them in case they never watch me play again. And I thought about that like deeply for years, at like, this was like every single practice even. And so I think that focus, that commitment, obviously like consistency is key. There was a handful of days in 20 years that I didn't have the stick in my hand, wasn't training. So yeah, those are probably a few of the things that come to mind when you ask that.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That is high internal and high external drivers. Leaving an impression is external, and then internal is loving the way it feels to get better. Um, okay, very cool. And then what do you do? So athletes, they have a deep understanding of the work that is required to get better. And for some, it's about, the celebration of when it is better. And for some is, they love the work. Are you more interested in the work, or are you more interested in the celebration when all of the work is kind of happening in the way that you hope it would?
Yeah, 100% the work. This is
So what
probably
do
a
you,
flaw.
yeah, no. Just I want to get to the second part of it
Yeah.
really quickly, which is what do you do behind the scenes? What do you do? What does your work look like that is not visible to others? Because in the world of athletics, like popular athletics, we watch somebody on TV and we're like, oh, look at that. And then if you could go to practice, you would see something. And then there's, like how the work is done. But then there's other stuff that the greats do that most people don't recognize. And so I'm interested in that part of you.
So when you ask about athletics, what I think about is there'd be these moments where I would be in a similar emotional type state, right? Like where pressure could be on the line. This could have been in school or something like that. And so I would think about how I'm feeling with that pressure and how I would handle that on the field. And so I literally looked for like little moments that I could train the sport and the craft where I wasn't on the field or in the training room. So that was something I feel like I tried to do, and like I just never really talked about that very much, but would do those little types of things.
Like what? What's an example?
I'm trying to think of like a really clear one for this. This could be like really dumb. So like obviously like speed, agility, all that stuff's important. There'd be like classes where like I'd be doing a leg lift for like 45 minutes in a class. This is like in high school or something, right? And then like I know I'm like laughing saying this sounds corny, but even like how I would get up from a chair, like would think about like I'm going to be like literally ultra explosive here and stuff like that. So I looked for like little moments that I could train certain skills that just no one would see or think about.
That's it. Dude, I love that you're sharing this, because this is the near obsessive, the uncommon, relentless commitment to figuring it out. And sometimes I do not wish this on people, because it can be tiring and thrilling, but the tiring part is like, whoa, what am I doing with my life? Like, every opportunity I'm trying to make the micro choice to be explosive or smooth or like present or whatever it might be. And how are you doing that in your business now, or as a parent?
Yes, I mean,
let's go business on this point.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a few common practices, right? Like I need to have an informational type edge in some component, right? With how the business is going to be done, to understand that. And so there's like my study practice, the same way I approach literal physical training in a sport. I view that as like, I need to be like a mental athlete. And so there's components like you need to have the informational edge of what you're trying to understand. You need to know the other side of that. We were talking about that before, right? Like how do you argue it? I just learned a lot from like investors. They've been very helpful. So these two guys didn't help me I don't know, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, but they always talk about like, you can't make an argument until you know the other side just as well. And so in different business approaches, I'm trying to think about that. Like, what's the information I can do? But then also where I think sport, the understanding there is I'm trying to think about how this really aligns with who I am. And that gets back to the push-pull I was talking about before. I couldn't have been a professional basketball player because I didn't have the drive to be a professional basketball player. And so I think there's certain things that align with who I am as a person. And can I show and be that person for the business? Where in the past, I probably thought I could do something differently, like even managing a large team. I'm not great managing a large team, even though my ego thought I wanted to do that. I can't do that. So I had to learn from that. And so now it's easy for me to say no to an opportunity where that would come up, because I think my natural alignment, I would be better suited for having a better impact with smaller teams. So just trying to be aware of those things and then putting more effort towards those, because I feel like my potential there is that's just like 10x greater than if I was trying to manage a large team where I could only get little incremental gains of progress. So that's kind of how I think about it in the business realm.
if we had a little mosaic of folks that have been influential for you, and I'm interested in the ones I might know because that might help, me here in this part of the question. But who are some of those folks? You mentioned two of them. Your dad and your mom are two more, so you've got four there. Who else is on your mosaic?
Yeah, it's funny because this was once again maybe like 5, 6, 7. I think it was, I don't even remember. It might have been a Danny DeVito movie, and it was called The Renaissance Man. I heard that concept the first time, and I go, wait, there's someone who's really, really good at multiple things. That concept, from as early as I can remember, I became fascinated by that. So anytime I saw someone achieve success in multiple domains, like I just lit up inside. I was like, that's really cool. And so models and deconstructing people like that are so important to me, but I love finding them all over the place. Like I was watching this Tony Hawk documentary. It's on HBO Max right now. And just like, I was like, hell yeah. Like I just loved hearing about his process and his thinking. And then like a few weeks ago, around the Momentum Surfers, Kelly Slater and all that, just like understanding what they were doing. And like, so I look for these at any time. There was a Spielberg documentary. I'm not in filmography, but like how he was authentically aligning himself, and that was coming out through his movies that I had no idea about before. So I look for those all the time. So like, if you want to know about like a few staples for me growing up, someone was Ray Lewis. I know he can be controversial. How he led, his commitment, his desire, that internal drive, man, Mike, like for years, I was like eating off that.
So for folks that maybe don't know Ray Lewis, he was a radical competitor in the NFL, a large, imposing, hard-hitting football player. How do you get around some of the stuff like that is so outlandish that he says? Like, like his energy is incredible. Like, but some of the stuff that I listen to, I'm like, whoa, you can't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard him talk in 10 years. I'm talking about on the field. Like on
the field, like it, yeah. He's come such a far way in the way that he's on TV now, and so but he is a savage competitor. Yeah. My God! So that's the part you resonate with.
Yeah, when I was first playing lacrosse, so this was 5th grade when I first started. Just before the game, my dad would kind of just like he was probably putting me like in a great head state, and he was it's animal time. And I just like
animal time.
I had I had a ton of aggression. I played like football younger too. Like I had to channel that aggression. So like I saw that and I just loved that. Another person, this was really, really impactful for me. So the time in the sport, I was in 5th or 6th grade. The best player in the entire world was this guy, Casey Powell. He played at Syracuse. He was like 4-time All-American. I got to see him in one of his summer games. And my dad's like, that's Casey Powell. Let's run up there. Let's go get a picture. So my dad embarrasses the hell out of me. We go get this picture with Casey Powell. Casey says, hold on a second. He runs over to his bag, brings out his custom lacrosse gloves, which is like a huge deal. And he just gifts them to me. And so I still have this picture. It's funny because now Casey and I know each other. Casey's even been on the show. We've hung out a number of times. But that moment, that guy was the most important person outside of my family in my entire life at that time. And not only did he do the picture, sign an autograph, he did something so special for me. So I realized the impact, singular moments, and people that we look up to, how they can shape our trajectory. So I never forgot that. So if I ever was in a position where another kid or a person looked up to me, even a small way similar to that, I need to show up like Casey Powell does. And so he was both the embodiment of what I looked for in a player, but then also his character. I thought it was just incredible.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Anyone else come to mind
like,
on the short list?
Unfortunately, like I'm too curious. I literally could go on and on and on. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay, so is it, if you were to categorize it, if you would like as a heat map, is it more athletic? Is it more spiritual leaders? Is it more business leaders? Is it more human? I want to say humanitarians. It's not a word. What's the word I'm looking for? Humanitarians. Like what would be the heat? How would that heat map look like if we had a mosaic?
Early on, it would have been athletes completely, and then I've been involved and really interested in entrepreneurship, and so that then took over a huge component of my life. And then I started to realize that how I was expressing myself as a lacrosse player, this was after I was done playing, I was viewing it as an art form. I just couldn't put words to that. So then I got really interested in creative acts. So I got obsessed around creatives. And then there also is like Eastern philosophy thrown in there. But now it's funny. It's like coming back again full circle to the athletic mindset. And now I can understand where they're not just approaching their sport like a sport. They're approaching it like out of craft and love. I was listening to Rodney Mullen the other day. He's one of the greatest street skateboarders of all time. And the way
hold on. Rodney, I would skate as a young kid growing up in Southern California. I'd skate about 3 miles. I grew up surfing, skating, and I'd sit on the hill. Rodney would only come out like at midnight.
Yeah, that's what he does.
My folks had no idea, but I would skate down to the spot that I knew he would, and so he and I connected as adults. And he's like, "You were that kid?" I was like, "Yeah, I was that kid." So Rodney awesome. Is a legend. Yeah. So I need to circle back with him. Like, okay, so what did you learn from Rodney?
He was talking about just, this gets back to the push and pull. Like he was like, when you so just purely love something, he's like, there's depths you can go to with that. And that he was talking about skating. And that's how I realized that, I kind of think about this as, you look at like the greatest coaches. I know you're close with Coach Carroll. Look at like a Phil Jackson, look at a Bill Belichick, all completely different, but they're all being them. And I feel like hearing Rodney talk about, he was speaking his truth, even if it wasn't someone else's truth, it was his truth. And so that for me now, like realizing that again in athletics, I just thought was really cool because I can understand it better at this point in my life.
Very cool. So everything that you are learning and applying and the man you're working on becoming, both as, a family man as well as a business person, how is your course going? How's the business side of what you're doing working?
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like I just love what I get to do every day, and that to me is really, really important. And so yeah, just continue to like.
What is the course experience for somebody who wants to learn?
So my actual course, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's called You Unleashed. And so it really is just kind of taking all of the lessons I've learned throughout the years around how do you tap into your higher potential. So I think about that in terms of like, first off, we're building a foundation, right? Like I mentioned awareness and getting clarity on like who you want to become and like what you're trying to go after. And the decisions you're going to make are going to be based on those underlying values, those principles. To use your language, Mike, that this was really helpful that you got out of me, was my life philosophy and thinking about that. But then there's also these different mindsets and certain behaviors that we can embody that help us tap into more of what we're capable of. And so obviously like, awesome. Yeah, so it's, this gets back to what I was saying a second ago around like Rodney was speaking his truth. Felt like really deeply aligned, where it was like, it felt just so freaking like I had to get it out of me. It wasn't like, oh, this is something like I'm going to do or I want to do. It was like, I had to sit down and put this out. And so I really try to do things that are aligned like that, where this probably sounds odd. It's like a deep inner calling. That's like, yeah, this really feels what you're compelled to do in this moment. And that's what it was.
Did you say calling or calm?
Calling.
So deep inner calling.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like you're meditating or journaling, but are those the two practices, or do you have other practices to get clear? And maybe you don't do either of those. I think you said journaling earlier.
Yeah. I sit down. I try to like give myself that free time. I do a lot of breath work. So I do a breath work routine. It takes about 10 minutes every single morning. That kind of helps put me in that meditative type state. I also do a lot of like lay down visualization as a full sensory experience. Even like for a speech or conversation like this one. So I do that a lot. And I think that helps me out. I think it does. I feel like it's really been helpful for me. And then yes, also trying to spend more time in that silence, in that stillness, because the more I've done that, I feel like I've been more aligned with who I want to be as a person and what to go after.
Very cool. And when you're lying down and doing your imagery, are you seeing yourself in the future being the person you want to be?
Yeah, there's times doing that. There's I'll even use it for actual workouts where I'm literally thinking about like the workouts. But yes, to the question around like fast forwarding, I don't know if I do it both ways. I am doing it where I'm like a drone above watching that, but then also in the experience as well.
Yeah, yeah. But not the research is not clear.
Yeah,
If
I
there's
kind of
a,
all toggle between the two.
yeah, I would say instead of, well, if you're fast toggling, it might get in the way of the feeling. And the feeling is the big word that you're looking for, or the experience that you're looking for is to feel what it feels like to be at your best later. And so if you're toggling back and forth quickly, it's like, I think that the feeling becomes, at least for me, and athletes and executives I work with, that they tend to say that the feeling gets diluted. So if you can stay in one
Yeah.
frame of reference for a while and then like flip over to the other, I think that you might find, and maybe you're doing that already.
Yeah, I try to do the slow toggle. As
Slow
opposed
toggle.
to,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, cool. Sean, this is awesome. I am honored to be able to spend this time and to understand more. And I'm grateful that you've asked me to be part of it. And your community is strong and vibrant. And I love that you have taken best practices across your lifespan, but also the 300 conversations you've had on the podcast, and then to turn that into a course. And then I know that you're also investing in products and small businesses as well. So how's that part of you going?
Yeah, no, I love that. Being able to connect with others. And I think it's kind of like one of the core things is helping others even see the potential within themselves for their business, for themselves. It's funny, like early on, I probably would have been trying to be more strategy. And then just the reoccurring theme is within all the businesses, I'm an advisor and investor. And they're like, no, you're like, I almost feel like this is more like a therapist type role as opposed to like strategy. So for me, that's like love. Yeah. That's fun. I love connecting with those people and kind of seeing what we're all capable of.
Awesome. Sean, love it. I'm wishing you the absolute best in what you're doing. And again, thank you for including me, and wishing you continued success.
Mike, there's no one else I would have rather had to do this. So thanks so much, man. I appreciate this.
What an honor. Thank you.
Got you there with DeLaney.
And I want to thank you for watching another powerful episode of the What Got You There podcast. We drop new episodes every single Sunday. So if you subscribe to the page, you'll be the first one to see these powerful episodes. Remember, we deconstruct world-class performers to understand their strategy, tactics, and the routines they've used to help them become world-class in what they do. So if you want to understand and then implement these into your own life, you're going to want to subscribe to the page. Remember, we also put out a weekly newsletter called Momentum Monday, which is just a quick synthesis of everything I've been reading, listening to, and watching behind the scenes. You can stay up to date and follow everything we're doing at whatgotyouthere.com.
Got you there with DeLaney. Got you there.